Hey YouTube, welcome back to a brand new Animal Crossing video, and our first video in the Nintendo Switch 2 era. Now that the Nintendo Switch 2 has officially released, you'll be glad to know there are a few options when it comes to moving your Animal Crossing data from the old console to the new. So today we're taking a look at every way you can safely transfer your Animal Crossing New Horizons Island over from your current Nintendo Switch to the new Nintendo Switch 2. So if you find this helpful, be sure to leave a like on the video as it helps out so much, and please consider subscribing if you're new here. And let's get into it. Now, there are actually 4 ways to transfer your Animal Crossing New Horizons Island between Nintendo Switch and Nintendo Switch 2. And honestly, it's not that different from transferring between original systems, although some methods are more recommended than others, so definitely stick around to see which is best for you. Number 1. Local System Transfer. Now, Nintendo have made it super easy to transfer your entire Nintendo Switch over to the Nintendo Switch 2, which transfers almost all data, including your Animal Crossing New Horizons Island. To do this, you need both your current Nintendo Switch and your new Nintendo Switch 2, and for them both to be updated to the most recent firmware. Don't worry, we'll cover how to do this with only one console shortly, as well as only transferring your island by itself without the system. To transfer your system locally, including your New Horizons Island, simply navigate to the system settings on your current Switch, scroll down to System, and then again to System Transfer to Nintendo Switch 2. Select it to begin, press Next, and follow the on-screen instructions. You'll get to a screen that prompts you to make sure your Nintendo Switch 2 is close by. At this point, make sure both consoles are on, have full power, select Done, and a local connection will be made between the two consoles. You can then follow the on-screen instructions and let your Nintendo Switches do their thing. This will safely transfer your entire system and your Animal Crossing New Horizons Island over. However, it's important to note that whilst your system is technically cloned and also remains on your original Switch, your island isn't and is physically removed after the transfer to avoid people cloning their islands. This is by far the most recommended way to move your New Horizons Island safely, but it's not the only way. Number 2. Cloud System Transfer. Thankfully, it is possible to do a system transfer before you get a Nintendo Switch 2, which is super useful if, for example, you're looking to trade in your original Switch towards the Nintendo Switch 2 and want to keep your data. And thankfully, this method also includes the transfer of your Animal Crossing New Horizons Island. Like before, head to Settings and begin the system transfer to Nintendo Switch 2. Navigate your way through the on-screen instructions until you get to the screen that prompts you to make sure your Nintendo Switch 2 is close by. In this instance, select I don't have a Nintendo Switch 2 console yet. Now, instead of setting up the local system transfer, you can send your system data, including your island, to Nintendo servers in the cloud in advance. Continue with the on-screen instructions, making sure you read the warnings, and select a user who will be responsible for receiving the data when you get your Nintendo Switch 2. Eventually, you'll get to a screen that confirms you're ready to send data to the server, and this is your point of no return. It's important to note this completely removes all of your data from your current Nintendo Switch, unlike the previous option, so don't do it until you're finished with your Nintendo Switch. If you're ready and you go ahead, you should know that your data is only stored by Nintendo for 1 year, but hopefully that is plenty of time to swap out your Nintendo Switch for a Nintendo Switch 2. Anyway, once complete and when you have your Nintendo Switch 2, you can use it to receive the system transfer from Nintendo servers when setting up the console, and of course have access to your New Horizons Island once again. Again, this is the recommended method if you're trading in consoles, for example. Number 3. ACNH Island Transfer Tool. Now, some of you may be familiar with the Animal Crossing New Horizons Island Transfer Tool, which for those that aren't, is an application available from the Nintendo Switch eShop that allows you to transfer your island between Switches. And although system transfers make it super easy to move your island safely along with your system, the Island Transfer Tool certainly has its place. For example, if you get a Nintendo Switch 2 and want a fresh start, but want your Animal Crossing New Horizons Island on the Nintendo Switch 2, this tool is for you. This requires a local connection, so to move your New Horizons Island to a fresh Nintendo Switch 2, you will need both consoles, and they both need to have the Island Transfer tool installed. Just quickly, it's important to note that there are known issues with the same Nintendo accounts not being able to run the same software, so just in case this hasn't been fixed for this tool, or it's still a thing on the Nintendo Switch 2, make sure you open the tool on the Switch 2 in a different profile. Don't worry, that profile doesn't need to have a resident on your island or anything, it's just so the software can run uninterrupted and avoid any potential issues we've seen in the past. Anyway, open the Island Transfer tools and press A to begin. Continue through the on-screen instructions on your current Switch, reading the warnings as you go until you reach the Let's Begin screen. Do the same with the tool on the Nintendo Switch 2. Just be sure to select the original Switch that has the island as the source and the new Nintendo Switch 2 that's receiving the island as the target respectively. Once you're happy, follow the on-screen instructions and press proceed and let the tools do their thing. It's pretty simple to do, to be honest, so don't fret. This method of transferring your Animal Crossing New Horizons Island is a little more niche and probably won't appeal to many, but it is useful if you're starting afresh but want to start this new generation of gaming with your old island. Number 4. Restore Island Backup. Moving on, something else you may be familiar with is the Animal Crossing New Horizons Island Backup feature. This is of course the built-in backup feature specifically for New Horizons, since New Horizons doesn't make use of Nintendo's own cloud saves for some reason. Anyway, from the Animal Crossing New Horizons title screen, you can press the minus button to speak with Tom Nook and access the game's settings. From here you can select Island Backup, and if you haven't already, you can set up the Island Backup feature, assuming you're a Nintendo Switch Online subscriber. Now this feature allows users to access a backup of their New Horizons Island in the event their Switch is lost or damaged. Therefore, although technically possible, especially if you have some kind of corruption during a transfer, this isn't really a dedicated option to transfer your island over to a Nintendo Switch 2, primarily because it relies on Nintendo helping you directly through customer support, issues using the same accounts when technically your island is fine, and various other factors. So it's not recommended to solely rely on the Island Backup to transfer your island, even if it's technically possible. That said, it is an important step to take, so 100% back up your island using this Island Backup feature before you start a system transfer, just so you have a backup somewhere should things go wrong. FAQs. Now, something you may stumble across when attempting a system transfer, for example, is some accounts on the source Switch requiring attention. If you see this pop up, it means a profile needs you to do something. Now, you can ignore it, but it's probably best to check what it is before you proceed. Most likely it's an account that hasn't been signed into for a while, so it's a security thing, or a Nintendo account needs to accept the latest terms and conditions. It's nothing major, but to reduce the risk of any issues surfacing during a system transfer, it's best to address these before continuing. And for the sake of completeness, obviously you don't have to transfer your system or your Animal Crossing New Horizons Island over to a Nintendo Switch 2 at all. You could simply take this opportunity to start afresh, including starting a New Horizons Island, all whilst keeping your old island on your old Switch and have two islands going forwards. This is possible with both physical and digital versions of the game, although digital copies do introduce limitations. Anyway, choose what method is best for you, and I hope you enjoy your Nintendo Switch 2. If you made it to this point in the video, be sure to post transfer in the comments just to let me know you did, and be sure to include how you'll be moving your Animal Crossing New Horizons Island over to your Nintendo Switch 2, or if you're sticking with the original Switch. I'd love to know. Thank you so much to the Patreon and channel members for supporting this content. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.